Welcome to the Spirit Sisters podcast, where we gather around the virtual hearth to share sacred stories about spiritual encounters and spiritual life journeys. I'm Karina Machado, and my life's passion is sharing these stories that lift us up and remind us that we are more than just our bodies. Today on the podcast, I have a very interesting guest. Her name is Katische Haberfield. Katische is a podcaster herself, and her podcast is called The Infinite Life, and I'll link to that in the show notes. She's also a spiritual regressionist and a spirit releasement therapist. So that's really interesting. We talk about this in the podcast, where she helps ghosts that are stuck between worlds to move to the light. So I think you're going to find it really interesting. One thing I do want to say is this conversation with Katische is probably not for anyone who's very new to the whole realm of spiritual encounters and the realm of spiritual awakenings, because it dives quite deep, and a lot of the concepts may be perhaps a little bit confronting to accept. It certainly makes for intriguing watching, and one thing I've always been passionate about on the Spirit Sisters podcast is offering my guests an entirely safe space to share their spiritual stories. I remember when I was writing Spirit Sisters way back, one thing I would always hear from my interviewees is, I've never told anyone this. People are going to think I'm crazy. And I heard that so often that I vowed that I would offer this safe space forevermore for people to freely come and share their experiences with no fear of consequences or judgment. And Katische is very vulnerable and courageous and honest in sharing her experiences and her encounters, which certainly touch on the idea of spiritual crisis and the intersection between spiritual crisis and spiritual awakening. So there's a lot to dive into. I really hope you enjoy this intriguing conversation. There was so much that we explored that I have invited Katische to come on for part 2, where I can delve into some more of the very fascinating things that have been happening to her all her life, but especially since around 2020. So feel free to share in the comments if you have some questions that you would like Katische to answer in part 2, and we'll do our best to get to those. For now, enjoy my conversation with Katische Haberfield. Hi Katische, welcome to Spirit Sisters.
Thanks, Karina. I really appreciate being here today.
It's lovely to have you on the show. So I thought we could begin, because I know that you have an extensive history of spiritual experiences and stories to share, and a lot of wisdom to share through your illuminations that you've gathered over the years. But I thought, let's begin by you sharing, if possible, your first memory of thinking we are more than our bodies.
So it's a bit of a weird one. I remember being a little girl in my backyard in McDowell in Brisbane, and I remember there being a swing set, the old-fashioned swing set from the 80s. And I wanted to have a little garden, and Mum had said no, and I must have just been doing something around that area. And I remember going to catch a bug, like a lady beetle or something, and then going like that, and then exclaiming out loud, "I've just killed my grandmother." And then thinking, what the heck? What? That doesn't even make sense. So I don't know what I was thinking, but it was definitely a feeling of, why did I say that? Do we live as bugs? Are we bugs? Did my grandma reincarnate as a bug? Like, I didn't even have an awareness of what reincarnation was at that stage in my life. And at that stage, I don't think my grandmother had died. So it didn't even make sense that I could have squashed a real life grandmother.
It's a really fascinating little anecdote, because to me what it speaks to is your natural, and perhaps our natural as humanity, our natural innate understanding that we are connected, that there is a fundamental connection between us and nature, or in other words, we are a part of nature. So to me it speaks of that. And it also speaks to the idea that when we're little kids, prior to the ego really taking hold, there is this natural intelligence that emerges. You know, it's quite it's a curious little anecdote, and it's also quite telling. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I wondered also if you could share what sort of spiritual tradition you grew up with.
Sure. So I associate my upbringing with being not a religious upbringing, but being a upbringing that had the foundation set for me as a way of, my father used to be very invested in my education. So he was from a Protestant family and my mum was from a Catholic family. And they both decided to bring me up as a part of the uniting church. And my dad would take me to church and he would sit outside and read the newspaper. He didn't want to have a bar of it, but he wanted to make sure that I figured it out on my own self. When my parents got married, they were in a little country town, which is now a city called Albury, and mum was Catholic and dad was Protestant, and that was a bit of a stir for that time. It was back in the days when you needed to, pretty much if a Catholic got married, the person that married the Catholic, they would have to convert to Catholicism. Mum wasn't a churchgoer. She grew up in a street where there were, and I didn't realize this until recently, there were girls that were carted off to the nunnery who had fallen pregnant, and then their babies were forcibly removed from them. And my mum never spoke of that until recently when she picked up a book in the airport and she said, "You should read this. This is from my time." And I read it and I thought, what? Well, for a minute I thought, did you have did you have a baby, mum? She's like, no, 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 no. Girls on my street were carted away multiple times and never got to see their babies. And she was always bitter about the Catholic Church because she grew up in a very poor family. They were immigrants from Germany and Yugoslavia. And so she didn't like what she called hypocrisy of having to hand in money at church to build beautiful buildings. And then I guess she saw that behind the scenes aspect of nuns and what they did to the girls. So she was not a fan of religion, and my father wasn't either. It was just one of those boxes that you tick. So no spiritual practices other than I went to church and Sunday school, and I loved singing the songs about Jesus. And I went to the Sunday school camps, and then I had enough of it. And I said, "I'm done, Dad." And he said, "Okay, mate." No, not really, but looking back,
Oh,
that's what he said. Yep.
fabulous. Okay. So we've had a few pre-chats and throughout you've shared some remarkable experiences, which I'm very excited for us to get into in a minute. Just before we do, I thought it would be interesting and also helpful for the audience if you could share your understanding of what a spiritual awakening is, because initially I thought you'd had this one principle spiritual awakening that led to all these experiences, and then you kindly explained that as you see it, spiritual awakening is an ongoing process, not a one instant event. So yeah, as a setup to your stories, could you please share more around that understanding, Katish?
Sure. And that understanding only just changed for me literally yesterday when my higher self and the archangels came to me and said, "You didn't have one spiritual awakening in 2020. You've had plenty along the way, and you're getting yourself confused because you're wanting to let listeners of the podcast know the different ways that you have evolved spiritually. So let's write it down." And they said spiritual awakening occurs continuously in their eyes, and that the miracle is that we're allowed to see them in reflection and in the small moments when we grasp how our consciousness seems to have shifted. So a lot of people do get a big change. For women, the primary change in their spiritual awakening, if they haven't noticed the small little moments, is in perimenopause and menopause. That's very simple because we change from being somebody who can give birth to somebody who can no longer give birth. And if we look at that from a spiritual process, that's from being a creative being that can produce to a non-creative being that then needs to fulfill their creative urge through being creative in their life. So that's how that works. Otherwise, though, different people come in with different capacities. And for me, the best way to explain it is mine came in small doses. And I'll give you a non-spiritual example, which was, a lot of people may understand this one. There was a point in my life when I drank alcohol, and then there was a point when I didn't. For me, although people wouldn't classify that as being a spiritual awakening. There was a massive change in perspective because the personalities of Katische before and after could seem quite different, and the way I conduct my life is quite different because I grew up and had many different careers, but the one that I went into when other things weren't working was I retrained into the wine industry, and I lived in the wineries in the Hunter Valley and the Hastings Valley and in the Riverina, and I trained and I went to university and studied winemaking, viticulture, and wine marketing. That comes with a lot of drinking and learning about wine and fortification of spirits. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed learning about the process, about the terroir, about all the language, the cultural history. And it wasn't until I went through perimenopause and alcohol started reacting with my body. So basically, it became, instead of a relaxant, which we think as human beings is what alcohol is doing, but it's not actually. Alcohol is not a relaxant, it's a stimulant and a depressant. And so what happened to me in perimenopause is that when I would drink a glass of wine, I would get bright red, have a hot flush, like just dripping, and I would become angry. I'd be agitated. And by the time half an hour had passed, I'd be like, I've got to go to bed. And so it was doing the opposite of what I wanted it to do. And I got to the point where I just poured it down the sink and I said, never again. And why that to me is a small example is that alcohol is societally accepted. It's all in our history. And so it was a big stance for me to do that and to be different from the Katische that everybody knew. I grew up in a cheese making family as well. So you have to understand that my background is in food and wine. And so even the other day when I went on a picnic, people are like, so what cheese do you eat, Katische, at the moment? And what wine? And I'm like, well, I'll have water and I have Woolworths branded Colby cheese. So I don't know, you tell me, and they're like, what's happened to this girl? But that needed to happen in order for me to tap into my mediumship skills, and to that then set me up to and for my channeling skills and also my spirit releasement therapy skills. And why that was important is because the things that I've learned doing the work that I do is that, and this podcast has been a lot about ghosts, is that when you drink spirits, so the word is there, spirit, and wine, alcohol of any sort, you can connect with the people that haven't crossed over, who died as an addict or a drunk, or even people that had a very strong, daily urge to drink alcohol. They're stuck here because of their regrets or their actions and their emotions, and they still have that desire for a drink or a smoke or whatever it is. And so because you are imbibing and you're not aware of what's in the other dimensions, then they are attracted towards you, especially if you're a healer or you have a very bright light or a soul contract to cross over beings like I do. And what happens is that they come closer and closer, trying to get closer to you. And if you've been drinking alcohol or smoking or imbibing some kind of a psychedelic, it shreds your aura and you get holes in it. So if you imagine, like, instead of a really tightly knit spider's web, it's got, like some kids poke their finger through the spider web and they get stuck in that web, which is your aura, and then they can move through the layers into your body and they can influence your thoughts and your actions. So as you can see, not drinking made me aware of that because it led me into the training that I did, but also it helped me to identify what it is that some of my clients need, which is ghost removal.
Very interesting. Thank you. And there's so much there that I want to touch on. So firstly, what strikes me is it's set up so perfectly, your soul contract, what you came here to do, one of these awakenings, in that your entire identity for a while was in this very wine industry that you then had to let go of in order to expand more into the fullness of who you really are. So it's just, that just perfection there of the wine industry and having to let that go to in so many respects, having to let it go. So you didn't just let go an enjoyable piece of, a Friday afternoon. You let go, I am, this expert in the wine industry. Like, that's huge. Our
Yeah.
professions do form a big part of who we are. So I thought that was really interesting. Also, I just want to alert if listeners want to learn more about what you're saying, because this idea of spirits being attached to people who are drinking in bars and things. There are so many near-death experiences. Well, maybe not so many, but I have certainly come across near-death experiences that highlight this very aspect that you're talking about. And one of the first ones I remember reading is a near-death experience from the 30s called Return from Tomorrow. It was written as a book by a doctor called Dr. George Ritchie. And he does describe exactly what you're saying, Katish, which I find fascinating. So in his NDE, he saw these spirits being drawn down to the people who were drunk, essentially.
And I've had a client, and I can't remember the exact episode on my podcast, but she she used to be like everyone else and go to a bar, and one night, like in her 20s, she had too much to drink and was still sitting at the bar, and she had a ghost attach, and he came up in a session, and he said, well, I saw the opportunity and I took it. She was drunk, so I needed a drink, and they think they can taste it through you, but it's just the association, the fumes, unless they're really embedded in you. And yeah, I have this recording of a past life regression session and a hypnotherapy session. So we did a hypnotherapy session first because she did a series of 3 sessions before she went into past lives. And he wasn't a past life connection, he was a current life connection. So from sitting in a bar. And so that really sort of was like, okay, that's, I can't refute that because she's in hypnosis. And when you speak to somebody, and you can speak to somebody that was formerly incarnated, and they say to you, well, yeah, I saw her at the bar and she was off a chops, mate, basically. And so I took advantage of it. Then you're like, wow, okay, my reality has changed.
That is intriguing, and we'll talk more about that because it also brings up questions around where are those spirits that have passed from the physical, but yet they haven't ascended to a plane in which they are free from those attachments. So what is that in between? And I do want you to share more around what you've learned around that whole in-between space. But I just want to pick up on another thing you mentioned in that spiel before, and it was around spiritual awakening for women happening around perimenopause and menopause. And I think that's so fascinating. When I wrote Spirit Sisters, I also remember interviewing women who had spiritual awakening experiences at puberty and also child rearing years, or actually in childbirth. So it's very interesting, those milestones and how they affect us spiritually. And what you said about creativity is intriguing as well. This is a very, very creative time for us in menopause, and I'm certainly finding that my creativity has sparked, and hence relaunching the podcast, writing my novel. And it is a very rich time of life in many respects, although it can be very challenging also in others. So I just wanted to pick up on that, and thank you for bringing that up because it's intriguing. So keeping in mind all of that you've shared, which around spiritual awakening and how it is this ongoing process, I was wondering if you could share your story, Katish. And I know that it's extensive and there's a lot that goes on. So maybe I'm leaving the floor to you to select those key moments that were your key moments of spiritual awakening, those miracle moments where you are able to connect with what you're being invited to open to.
It jumps quite a long way, but I'll invite people because they can listen to my story. The first time that I realized that I had existed before, other than as Katish, was when I had deja vu moments when I was traveling through Europe as a teenager and in my early 20s. And so, what I mean by deja vu moments is that I would go to locations and I would feel as though I had been there before. And I didn't see visions or anything, but they would just not like just a shiver, because I associate shivers with ghosts and things like that, but like if you would like take a step back or have your breath taken away because you're like, sure, I might have seen this on TV or I might have read something, but there's something really deep down in me here that's going, I don't like this. I know what this has been used for, or I know how that feels. And you're like, there's nothing in my life today that tells me that I should have this feeling right now. And so I had that feeling extensively when I lived in London, particularly around the Tower of London. So multiple lifetimes in London I have since discovered. I also discovered it in the French Riviera. I did a lot of backpacking by myself and with others, and I met up with people. And I'll give you an example. And because I understand a lot of people don't really believe in things, and they do believe in others. One of the things that has happened to me since I've worked intensively in the field is that I can also now download past life insights when I'm doing something. So originally I would have to go into a past life regression session or a Akashic record session to see a lifetime. Now I can have it instantaneously download and I can see a scene, and it's like I'm in hypnosis. It's behind my third eye. I see it in full vision. So here's a little story for you. When I went and lived in London, so I did what most Aussies did back then, and I went and moved to London thinking I was going to stay there forever or whatever it was. I worked in the .com industry, so it was just before the NASDAQ crashed, and I went and worked for a seed-funded wireless startup. While I was there, the company got bought out, and I decided to come back home to Australia because I could see that my skills weren't going to be used for a little while. I also was sort of doing a long distance relationship with a boy that I had not dated, but had a beginning of a relationship with in my former employment, which was as a management consultant. He wasn't a boy, he was a man, but you know what I mean. And so we were emailing back and forward. And so when I went to the French Riviera, I bought a present. And this present, there was no reason that I should have bought this other than a clue of something that he said in his current lifetime. And he doesn't know this story, so hopefully he will never listen to this, but it was a framed photograph of a yacht in a yacht race in the French Riviera, right? So I went to a number of little towns, and then I stopped at Saint-Tropez, and this is where I found this picture, this print, and I absolutely had to buy it. I wasn't going to go home without it. And my cousin, who I met up with, laughed with me about it. And basically, I thought, I'll give it to him and I'll get it framed. And on the way home, and when I got there, the relationship dissolved. But so he never got a copy of this print. But I actually had a past life realization where I had died in his arms after falling out of a yacht in the French Riviera. And so that's what I call like a kind of a sense of a deja vu as well, in terms of, well, I had to have this picture of this boat, and I knew I had to give it to him, and I didn't know why. And it wasn't until I think it was last year or the year before, so that's nearly 20 years later, more than 20 years later, I had the visualization, and I knew that I had died, I drowned, and they pulled me back out of the boat, and I died in his arms. So that's the kind of stuff where you go, wow, okay, I've been here before, I don't know why. Will it ever be revealed to me? I don't know. But yes, if it wants to be revealed, and if it's important for you to reveal that, then it will be revealed. And so it's an example of one of the many things that I've been trying to heal, which is terrible motion sickness, especially on water.
Well, that's so interesting. And also what your story really tells me as I'm listening is how ongoing this journey is, and how, I mean, you did say the spiritual awakening process is continual, but that was 20 years ago that you bought that that print. And only recently did you have the understanding through this vision, through your third eye, of what was actually going on. So it is very much about living almost in putting puzzle pieces together in retrospect and then just moving forward. And I find this too, and moving forward with your knowledge, with these new understandings. But it is a long time coming, isn't it?
It is a long time coming. And sometimes these sorts of things can make you understand why some aspect of you doesn't feel healed after a relationship ends. You might be able to have discussions with people, and we had lots of discussions back and forth about what went wrong. But there was a part of me that was like, there's still something that's there that I don't seem to be getting over. What's wrong with me? Am I just some kind of, psychotic, obsessed kind of a person? No, I got married in between. I've had other relationships in between, but why does my mind still go back to it? And that's where the soul says, okay, you brave enough to know? Right. Okay, well, we'll show you. But here's the deal. Generally speaking, if you tell somebody about your past life connection, you have to deal with the fact, which I've never told him, never had any need to. You have to deal with the karma of that, which is, how does that change their perception of you now? Yeah. So what has been has been. That relationship is closed. We both got married. He's still very happily married with children. That piece of knowledge is not required for him unless, one day he contacts you and says, hey, I saw you do this. Can you explain to me, whatever. But usually you don't do past life regressions or that sort of thing for somebody that you are connected intimately with. That's just like doctors. But yes, if you tell somebody, you have to be willing to deal with the karmic implications. And I do often struggle about talking about any of my own perceptions. And Archangel Michael does say to me, well, why are you a past life regression therapist if you're not willing to give some examples of yourself? Because you came here to heal your soul and some of the relationships that you hadn't healed yet. So speak your truth, and your mind is what karma is, a spiritual law, but it's the intention behind it that makes it enforceable or not. And so we have helped you to come here to do a number of things in the spiritual realms. Number one was to heal yourself, and number two is to teach concepts. So in our mind, if you try to argue with us when you go to the light that there's a karmic implication and you should go down and try again to make amends with this particular fellow, we will say, no, you didn't do wrong by saying that you'd had a relationship. You did what was best, which is he doesn't need to know that, because the bit that was hanging on was at your end. Right? You're the one that needed to heal that.
Yeah, and what you're saying reminds me of the idea surrounding, this idea of twin flames, for instance, that it's not anything to do with the idea of getting together and having this romantic Hollywood life together. Rather, it is about each party healing themselves wholly, becoming a whole unit within themselves. So I was reflecting on that as you were talking and thinking that, I'm not sure if this fellow is what, our culture would term a twin flame or not, but I was thinking we don't know what inquiry your relationship invited him to open to, or what's still, because our relationships do mirror us and invite us to heal aspects that are unhealed.
Yeah, exactly right. And the answer is probably that in that French lifetime, with me departing early, he was the one left alone to grieve. And so he had the rest of his life to grieve and go through that process. Whereas for some known reason, I still held on to that relationship, even though I went straight up. And sometimes it's because what happens is that the cycle of karma, the best way to explain it is that we don't just have one lifetime with one person. We have many, many lifetimes. And what the angels and the archangels have been trying to get me to explain is that the reason they want people to, firstly, heal their emotions and do the deep journeying work in whatever modality you resonate with, is because one, they don't want you to become a ghost by being held back from your regrets. But two, they want us to get to the point where we say, okay, I met these people in this lifetime. I had these experiences. I did the best I can. I don't need to come back and go and find them in the heavenly realms, or whatever realms you want to call them, the afterlife. Get them to come and do a contract with me which says, let's try that again. I feel so bad. I'm going to do it on the opposite perspective this time, right? And what they want that to happen is they want that cycle to stop. Because if you have a look at, and it's not the best example, but is an example that comes to mind. Let's have a look at domestic violence being perpetrated from both the male and the female at the moment. If we wanted to look at that from a spiritual perspective, part of that could be, oh, last time I was the guy, this time I'm the girl. I feel really bad about that. I haven't learned my lesson. I need to punish myself for my own spiritual development. Therefore, I will come back and agree to receive it on the other end this time. So I'll be the perpetrator or I'll be the victim, depending upon what happened. Now, I know people will probably want to scrape their fingers down the blackboard and say, how dare you say that? But it's the truth. And I've seen it in my own lifetimes where I have done that myself. And what does it do? Sure, it gives your soul some healing and some perspective. But if you have the chance to heal those emotions and do some deep introspection, then you'll realize you did the best at the time with what you could do. And if you forgive them, no matter what they did, then you can forgive yourself. And sometimes you can't forgive them until you learn to forgive yourself first. And self-forgiveness is the key to understanding that we are all connected, whether we have had relationships together in other lifetimes, or with the very fact that we all come from the one place originally. And so therefore we need to learn compassion for each other. And sometimes things are inexplicable. We do things for inexplicable reasons. And sometimes we can be influenced by the thoughts and the energy of others that are here because we are all energy. And so we can just, really learn to forgive ourselves. And when we can simply look at ourselves and say in the mirror, I love you. And in our worst moments, when we're in having panic attacks or remorse, just keep telling yourself over and over again, I love you, I love you, I love you. If you can say nothing else. And we need to release the other person we've been in a relationship with, because we get tied by these etheric ties. And so a lot of people talk about simply visualizing a rope and cutting the scissors and removing that attachment. It doesn't work. I tried that, for example, with this gentleman. That was one of the first things that I did, was I visualized that. It didn't work. And so one of the things that I've found to be the most powerful things to do, other than doing like past life regression, if that's not your cup of tea, is to take the benefit. I've modified my own form of the Ho'oponopono prayer, which says, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Then I add in, I forgive you, thank you. And then I add in namaste, which means I see your soul, and then bless your soul. So what you're saying is, I see you. I'm going to forgive myself for the way I acted around you, because you're not 100% part of the blame. I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to forgive me. Thank you for being in this interaction with me. We've grown out of it, even if we don't recognize it or can't see it right now. It's holding me back. Let me take my energy. I'll give you your energy back. And let's bless our souls at the same time. And you might have to say that over and over and over and over again, but you'll work through the layers and you'll cry your eyes out. You'll have bad dreams or whatever you want to do. But each time you shed the tears, you shed limiting beliefs. It frees up your soul and it removes the grief from your lungs. And, what I've seen is that the lungs contain a lot of grief for everybody incarnated on earth. I mean, that's one of the things that people don't understand about COVID, is that COVID was an attempt to shed the grief from the lungs of the people on the earth. That's where we store our grief. So when you get bronchial infections and things like that, sure, there is a a doctor's explanation for it. But if you don't process your grief, if you store the grief, and if you try to punish yourself for your grief, it stores in your lungs. And so, yeah, we have to take responsibility for noticing how we feel, and we have to stop doing, like even I did it with my kids when they were boys. Don't cry, honey. No, they need to cry.
Yeah.
They need to let it go. We need to express our emotions.
Definitely. Gosh, you shared so much that's really quite fascinating there. And I think, I mean, a lot of what you shared, as you implied, is difficult for us, concepts that are very challenging for us culturally to accept, counterculturally. They are countercultural. Things like, the Ho'oponopono prayer, which is very beautiful, and I've used it before too. And thank you for reminding me that it exists as this lovely tool, because it says, I'm sorry, please forgive me. So when you're trying to forgive someone else, the prayer says, please forgive me. So people would not understand that if they are not pursuing a spiritual path. They will have no concept as to why someone has done something terrible and you're asking yourself to forgive yourself. People just don't understand that. And the concept of forgiveness is such a trigger point. It upsets a lot of people as soon as you mention it, But I think we are invited with forgiveness to broaden our view, to broaden this scope of life. Like sometimes I feel like we just look very narrowly. But spirituality, and there are so many modalities, as you said, generally spirituality invites us to broaden that horizon and to see more. And where could that take us? Where could
And
that take us if we were to do that?
Forgiveness is always for you, not for them.
That's
It
right.
does, by forgiving yourself, it helps them in their evolution as a soul, because basically it's just this knot that you tie each other up in. You bind each other with these etheric ties, and it doesn't matter ultimately who was at fault, even though we humans have to logically, rationally analyze something. The fact is, you were there at that moment. Something brought you together, so therefore you have a part in it. Even if you can see that you did nothing wrong, you were brought there by forces bigger than yourself to interact with that person.
What you just said reminds me of a famous quote by Maya Angelou, and she said, "Love liberates, it doesn't bind." Liberates, it frees. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. And Ho'oponopono itself arose, I'm sure you know, Katish, the story of its genesis. It's so interesting. Just very quickly for the readers, it was a doctor, I believe, or a medical professional in Hawaii who was assigned the management of one of the most, I guess, feared medical institutes for people, disturbed individuals. We would call it, I might call it a mental institution in the past. But anyway, and he didn't know where to start with these people. It was just horrendous, the state that these men lived in, and what he was seeing every day. And what he started to do was read their files and do this Ho'oponopono. And throughout this long process of simply reading their files and saying the Ho'oponopono prayer, the whole environment transformed, and the people transformed, the incarcerated men transformed. And it's just intriguing, this idea that we heal ourselves and our beliefs and perhaps our prejudices, and how that then affects our fellow humans, because as you said, we are connected. We are
connected, yeah.
On
and
a
our
level
thought,
we can't understand.
yeah, because every single thought we have is energetic. It's energy. And so our thoughts are what bind us to other people. So, if you're religious, you'll know in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, right? It was spoken. So what you speak is like a spell, what the words that you cast, because people can feel them. Everybody knows the feeling of being stabbed in the back by the words of somebody else. Why? Because there are, and psychics have drawn it. When you speak or even think, it casts it's energy, right? And the energy actually takes form. And the form, if you drew it, for example, can have hooks, and the energy actually does attach into other beings, and it hooks into you. That's why we say when we lift a weight up off our shoulders, when we speak what happened to us, because we carry the energy on our shoulders and it embeds into our body and it becomes illness. So that's why I guess the mindfulness movement does part of the way to healing ourselves, because a lot of the time we're not even aware of our thoughts, and we're not aware of how our own thoughts can come back and slap us in the face. They're continually slapping us in our face. You know, as people say, the cruelest things you will ever utter are to yourself, about yourself. And I'll give you an example of this. After my divorce, I hated myself to the extent, because I went through great trauma trying to figure out how to fix my marriage, because I always wanted to be married with children, and it just didn't work out. And I decided to leave, and that was a big thing for me, because I discovered that I felt that that was therefore a failure. And I shaved my head. At home one night, I manifested welts in my hair, and I had had a previous blade for when I went to the local Shenrizik, which was a Buddhist monastery institute. And they talked about the ego and the perception of the self. And, you know, at the end of a retreat, I said, oh, I've shaved my hair off. It's fine. I'll deal with my perceptions of my face and my beauty. And it grew back. And then when I was going through this whole, you know, I don't think I can be in this marriage anymore, I woke up in the middle of the night with a panic attack, and I was itching all over, you know, and I was being irrational. And I thought, I know, if I get rid of my hair, I'll be able to bathe my wounds. They felt like they were massive, and I'll be able to heal them. So I literally got out some scissors and my ex-husband's clippers, and I went for it, and they got stuck, and I ended up being in the shower with a bottle of conditioner and a razor blade. And I shaved my hair off with a razor blade. Went back to bed, woke up in the middle of the night, vomited, rang my mum, and I said, I think you're going to have to put me in a psychiatric institution. I've just done this. Went to Brisbane, went to the New Farm Clinic the next day with a psychiatrist, got an assessment, and they listened to me, and they said, honey, that's your example of committing suicide. That's your saying you can't go any further. You have tried everything from your perspective, not his perspective, and you're done. But, you know, you both need to get some counseling, and then you can make your decision. Well, I went and got psychotherapy. But that is an example of after I left, and I was then with 2 toddlers, pretty much full time, because my ex-husband lived a FIFO role. I would look in the mirror, and every day I would say the words, I hate you. You're ugly. You know, and there was a lot of F words in there. And I listened a lot at that time to Louise Hay, and I couldn't do the mirror work. But all I was cognizant of was that I had to stop the I hate you every time I looked in the mirror. And that was, you know, a good year of just stopping that thought. So that's an example of how, you know, you slap yourself in your face with the thoughts. And that was an extreme version, because I was dealing with having no hair, I was dealing with being single, raising 2 kids by myself practically, and all of the stereotypes that I had built around this concept of being married that were based on, tying it back to religion and values, my moral compasses, which I learned were actually also, bear with me here, linked to a past life where I had many children who died in infancy. And in those lifetimes, I was distraught because I needed to produce 2 male heirs, or at least 1 male heir, hence the saying, an heir and a spare, for the kingdom that I was a part of. And here I am in this lifetime, and what have I produced? I finally got the 2 male heirs, and I can't keep my marriage together, which was a thing in that particular lifetime. So you could see that
it caused a crack.
It caused a crack in me, and I couldn't reconcile that here I was given the gift of 2 very healthy male children. I had proposed to my husband on the leap year. So, you know, I don't, in Eat, Pray, Love, I think Julia Roberts says, I participated in every moment of this decision to be married, just where Elizabeth Gilbert is describing her first marriage. I chose the dress. I did everything to do with this wedding, and here I am on the kitchen floor, the bathroom floor. She is crying my eyes out, saying, "I don't want to be married." And I was exactly Elizabeth Gilbert, Julia Roberts, Eat, Pray, Love. In that moment, I was like, I can't do this. Yep, I know my soul has chosen to give me this gift in this lifetime. What, what am I doing wrong? So that thoughts and emotions are really important to pay attention to, because they give you clues over what your struggles have been in your evolution as a soul over the different lifetimes, and how you've been set up to try and heal those in this lifetime, so it doesn't continue to internally destroy you.
That's yeah, I'm reminded of a quote that's in A Course in Miracles. I've been a student of that channeled text, A Course in Miracles, for 10 years. And there's a line in there that says, no thought is idle. They all create. So A Course in Miracles says that only what we create from love is real. The rest is not as we think. It's an illusion. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But yes, we're always, like you said, our word is our wand, and we are always creating, and we just don't realize it, And that's why the process of experiencing your actions in, for instance, a near-death experience life review is so fascinating. Yeah, as well in that sense. So now, where were we at? So you're sharing some of the key moments, and that's I can see that that's an astounding moment of spiritual revelation. The word spiritual crisis came to me. I've done a bit of reading around those. We might think of it as a nervous breakdown in the old-fashioned terminology, but it can also be likened in some instances to a spiritual crisis, which you had then, especially considering it was tied to your past life. And it was so interesting what the psychologist said, or the psychiatrist, that is your form of suicide because you have ended that life.
Yes.
That,
yeah, you've entered that identity. You become
yeah,
not that person anymore. Yeah.
yeah. So I know that, so you're going through your key moments, and thank you for sharing that one. And I know that at some point you trained as a hypnotherapist, a past life regression therapist. And I guess you did this in order to more fully explore these experiences that you were having.
I needed to understand myself. I needed to understand why my traditional career didn't work out. I did a undergraduate degree in marketing, Bachelor of Business Marketing. Then I did a master's in marketing straight away. I got the Dean's Award for Academic Excellence. Got hired by the largest management consultancy, Accenture, in the world. I went and worked at a .com, and not a single part of my career ever worked out according to the success I expected. I encountered issues in every career. And I then, on top of that, married somebody. The marriage didn't work out. And then when I left that for 3 years to heal, and I thought, right, I'll start dating again. I'm young. I was only in my 30s. I can find love again. And I thought, right, well, I want a family. So I don't want any more of my own kids, but I want to do this blended family thing. And so I tried to date people, and none of them went anywhere, like more than 3 months, or the longest was 1 year. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Is there something wrong with me? I'm an intelligent person. I'm okay. I'm fine looking. I'd gotten over that. I was like, I'm attractive. It's not working out. There must be something else that I need to do. And it wasn't until 2019 when I got to my what do you call it? Blended family opportunity. So I was love bombed by a particular man who seemed very nice, had twins, and we moved in together way too fast. And over a heated argument, after a few wines at the kids' fete, I felt fear. And I called my mum and I got her to pick me up. And that moment was the end of that relationship. Now, so we had nothing. We had to move in with my mum. I'd sold all my stuff pretty much to get into that relationship. So I had nothing.
Mm.
And I felt humiliated and ashamed. I felt bad the relationship ended over an argument while we were both had too much to drink. I tried to make amends for it, and that was a closed door. And so I had to move on with my life. But there I was as a mid-40s single mother with 2 kids living at home with her mother. And so we moved into our current place at the end of 2019. And it was then that I thought, I need to do some more healing. What else haven't I tried? Because I had studied aromatherapy and I'd gone the essential oil path because I know the olfactory system and I understand how aromas can heal emotions. I was like, I must be pickled by now because of all the essential oils I've inhaled or put on or, used rollerballs for, diffused. I still use them today. I thought this layer is not enough. And at that stage, I hadn't done any formal work in past lives. I'd read lots of books about NDEs. I'd read lots of books about past life regression therapy. And I thought, I'm stuck here in lockdown. And one day I was drawn to go buy some crystal singing bowls. And I was like, I don't know why I want them, but I want to do that. And I'm going to go and study online via London to do a sound healing course. And so I studied sound healing, and immediately I was drawn into doing not the kind of sound healing where you set up a shop and you put the bowls over and you play them and you heal the body that way. I was like, that's not going to work. It's lockdown, right? I want to do shamanic journeys. Why do I want to do shamanic journeys? I don't know, but I can take people in and I can do these shamanic style journeys where they can do soul retrieval and they can heal their womb of emotions. And I got very profound testimonials and experiences. And I remember saying to a friend that I met online in a group, I said, I think I'm actually meant to take this into past lives. I think that I can use the singing bowls to go into past lives. And she said, yeah, I'm pretty darn sure you can. And so I had some people that tried it with me, and we did. And then I thought, right, well, I need to go do some training here. So I went and did some training. And it's just been sort of that moment of going into past lives, firstly, allowed me to go and be a student for other people. So I was able to receive sessions. There's Akashic Records is a different modality, and I prefer past life regression therapy, but I did get a lot of sessions very kindly from a friend who was doing Akashic Records certifications that really helped me at the time. And so I was starting to understand my own journey as to what I had set up in this lifetime to come and heal, and how things were all happening for a reason, why I was meeting certain people, how I'd met them in other lifetimes, how they didn't need to know that, and how this was my chance to, I guess, be faced with the situation and not turn it into a negative karma situation. So to not die at somebody's hands of domestic violence, to not be a perpetrator, for example, and to learn to be able to walk away from a relationship and heal it myself. So there's some examples. So the past life as a therapy, a healer's always got to heal themselves. That's part of the healer's journey. And so I conducted my own work to understand my own journey at the same time as I learned to do it for other people to help them with their journey. And what that allowed me to do was to be empathetic and compassionate about what people were going through and to have insights into their journey. And then I guess that what I then experienced was that I bought a house opposite a hospital, and then the ghosts came floating in, and I think we're going to almost be out of the episode time.
Well, let's keep going a little bit longer. That's all right. So yes, because you do draw some fascinating connections between past lives and ghosts.
Yeah.
And so we touched on that a little bit at the beginning, and moving into this home in 2020, which was over the road from the hospital, really galvanized your work in this direction. So why don't you share a little around what happened in terms of the ghostly activity that you experienced when you moved into this place 5 years ago?
Yeah, so and this is where I was confused as to whether this was the only spiritual awakening, because what happened was a cataclysm. Three things started happening to me. I began to suddenly, out of nowhere, connect with lots of different forms of spirit guides. So that was the first thing. And the first thing was that I had a spirit guide named White Wolf who appeared and said to me, "You need to," and I was just learning to use the pendulum at that time, "you need to go find the boys named Haggy. They've died and they need to go to the light." Okay. And they're soldiers. And so that's happening. I buy a house opposite the hospital, and the direct ward opposite the hospital is not just the maternity ward or anything. It is the returned soldiers ward. So in order to have a mental health problem so bad to go into that ward, is you have had to have attempted to commit suicide. So these are very troubled men because of what they have been forced to do in wartime on behalf of our nation, right? So I've got a spirit called White Wolf saying, "You need to go find these boys, Haggy." I've got the ghosts of the soldiers start flying over. And then I'm doing past life regression sessions, and the ghosts from some sessions come and fly into my house. And this is all happening in the matter of hours, days, and weeks at the same time. So it was kind of like, if you want to say God was testing me, God was. He's like, you're here to learn about ghosts, and we are going to help you heal your karma because you've discovered you had military roles in past lives. A lot of people died. So guess what? You're going to find everybody that we ask you to, and you're going to cross them over. That's your self-imposed penance and your spiritual penance for this lifetime. So the example with the Haggy boy, and I have it on my podcast, and this is where it links to another medium, is that so I was like, okay, I don't even know how to cross over ghosts, but I just started my podcast, and I had a lady who came on, Tina Irwin, and she taught me how to cross over ghosts. But I hadn't actually officially had the interview, I don't think, at the time, and I knew she had this prayer called the crossing over prayer. So I had a resource. And when when I started to do this Haggy thing, what I did is I went to the war memorials and I literally typed in, he gave me a date that this person had died. He said, find all the Haggies. And I went down the list in the war memorial. I typed in Haggy and I used my pendulum and said, yes, no. Is this one crossed over? Yes, no. And so then I said the prayer, invoked the angels. And the way that they explain it, and this is very hard to believe, except for I have a medium who's confirmed this, is my ectoplasmic mist basically came from my heart space, connected with them because they're stuck in the lower astral realms. They were stuck in the field where they died. They literally saw me as a bright light. They call me an angel of the night. And that then directed the angels to them. They could see me because they didn't believe in the angels, or they were not comforted. They didn't think that, if you've killed somebody because you're in the army and you've killed somebody else, you start to have doubt about you. Are you a good human being and whatever? And so together as a team, we lifted them from Flanders and took them to the light where they are in the rest. And so because I didn't believe enough in my mediumship skills, I hired a medium after a few months and I said, let's see who comes through. And she didn't know who I had, and she brought them through and they gave us afterlife interviews and they confirmed all of the stories of how I found them, either by by finding them in Flanders. They explained what it was like in the battlefield, how they looked up, saw the light. They explained why they became ghosts. They other ghosts who I ran into in cemeteries that I was sent by Archangel Michael to go find. They also confirmed my stories. So it's been an interesting, that's one part, is these little missions where I'm being sent out to go find these ghosts either in other countries or in my own country, which just seems totally unbelievable. But then also because of the karma of being a military leader and in quite a few wars, it meant that I bought this house for a reason. So therefore, it was my responsibility to help the gentleman across the road. They had no idea that I was doing it, but if they have a ghost that is attached to them, often soldiers have a ghost that's attached to them, because when they fall in the mud, and they die, they can't get up. If they feel any guilt or emotion or confusion at the time of their death, if they are traumatized, then the soldiers cling to each other. Oh, I can see my mate. They don't know that they're not dead, because it's like being in a very low grain quality movie where you can't see, like in fog. They're just like, oh, here's my mate. They don't know they're dead. Most ghosts don't know they're dead, so they attach to their mate. And so they'll come back here, and so you can have a soldier who's got ghosts attached to them from all sides and from all wars. And so I helped them cross over. And then the third part was because I was taking people into past life regression sessions and hypnotherapy sessions, because my mediumship skills were developing so strong, I then began to be able to see the ghosts that were in people's past lives that hadn't crossed over, which is a really weird and funky thing to be able to do. Most past life regression therapists, unless they do spirit releasement therapy as a modality on top of past life regression, they will never seek to identify or have any interaction with a spirit from another lifetime that hasn't gone to the light.
It is a rare thing. I haven't heard much about that at all. It's fascinating. So let me just clarify a couple of points. So the hospital that is over the road from your home, is that the home you're still in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that a working hospital, or it is? So you were saying that there are people who have tried to take their own lives, so they're in there. Is that right? Did you say?
So it was built as a military hospital.
Okay, yep.
In the war, and then now it's a normal functioning hospital.
Gotcha.
But it does have a military ward to it. It's yeah.
I understand. So those spirits, those ghosts, actually, we should call them, they're so the patients in the hospital run the risk of having these ghosts attached to them. Is that correct?
Well, that's a risk in any hospital.
Okay.
Generally speaking, the ghost of a military person is not going to attach to anybody else. Dave explained it to me as they look for like resonance. So they'll attach to you if you look like their mum or their sister, if they have known you a previous lifetime, or if they see the bright light around you and they know that you have the ability to cross them over and that you're not doing it. So now these days they don't attach to me, right? They just know that I'm here, and then I cross them over very quickly. I've had them attach, and it's very, very painful. But they know. They see you as darkness with a white aura, a very bright white aura. And so they won't come until they're ready to go. So I have, in the next season of my podcast, interviews with people that I have crossed over from the afterlife, where I've done it myself, not hired a medium. I've transcribed the session notes now from crossing over a large number of ghosts, where I've asked them afterwards to reflect on their life. And they say to me, you have to be ready to go. And so if you happen to walk past and I knew that you were there, then I'm going to try very hard to get your attention to be ready to go. And so in a hospital, they will come looking for you if you are of similar resonance, or they know that you've got an ability. Otherwise, they don't bother you. So yeah, I have an angel attunement, which is part of the deal as well, which means that I hear a bell ring in my right ear. And when that bell rings, like, you can't miss it. It's a distinctive pitch. And that means that a baby's died at the hospital. And then therefore I cross them over, because the angels can't interfere with free will. And so if there's a baby born in the maternity ward and that bell goes off, I know that that child needs me to call the special angels for babies, and then they go straight to the light, because a baby's just been born. It hasn't even orientated. And so that's another weird skill, but it's a very privileged skill. It makes me cry every time the bell rings. But there's a reason I've been put right here, is to help. So I've had people come across who have died in the middle of an operation. and they've said to me, I was just lying down. They just started the operation and here I am with you. What am I doing here?
And do you see them, or is it more of an internal thing through your third eye?
Yeah, so it's very hard for a ghost to do a physical apparition. It takes all of their energy.
Mm,
So when you see a ghost physically, like, ghost hunters might do, that ghost is desperate for help.
right.
Okay, it takes up all their energy. And also, the longer a person has been in ghostly form, in spirit form, like we all go to spirit and become ghosts basically, but we then do our review and go up pretty quickly. But it's those that have not resolved their emotions and their guilt that stay around and get self-imposed in the hell realm. So the longer a spirit has been around as a ghost, the the more they degrade, which means that they can't come in physical. And that's where you need your skills of clairsentience, clairaudience, clairgustance. I've been in the supermarket and I've just been standing there getting some shampoo, and I've had to go stand right up beneath my nose, and I've thought, what is that smell? And there's no one around me. And then I've gone, oh God, it's somebody I need to help. It depends upon your sensory things. But yeah, they come when they need help and when they're ready. And if I see them in my third eye, like I have had a very clear apparition, was when I had a past life daughter float towards me and she drowned on the Titanic. So she was still wet. And I saw her, the minute I saw her, I burst into tears because I recognized her. And that confirmed a past life on the Titanic for me. So, yeah, really weird skills, really weird.
They're very specific, like the bell ringing and knowing that you have to help the baby is very, very specific.
Very specific.
So, and it's so fascinating the soul regrets, what it is that holds the ghost back, and that's why they're a ghost, right? Because of
Yes.
these soul regrets. That's really interesting. And there is so much that I want to go into exploring with you further. It is an extraordinary journey that you've been on, and that you are on, because constantly unfolding. So I think we need to come back and do part two, because I've got lots more that I want to ask you about, and I know that you've got so much more that you want to share. I want to ask you about your understanding of time within the framework of past lives, because I've been, understanding that we live our lives simultaneously. It's all one. It's all arising as one. So I want to ask you about that. Most ghosts don't know they're dead, you said. I want to ask you about that. That's absolutely fascinating. So would you come back for part
Yeah,
two?
sure. No problem at all. Like I said, it's hard to encapsulate what's happened just in the last 5 years alone. But all I ask for people is to suspend their disbelief, because every single day when I wake up and I think, am I going mad? The first thing Archangel Michael and Zadkiel say to me is, remember, these things happen to you. They happened. You are not insane. You physically experience this, and there is a reason, and that reason is so that people understand this for themselves, because people have not talked about this. And so that's why I started my podcast, and that's why there's like at least 70 past life regressions that are videoed with clients' consent. So you can go and you can listen and you can say, I don't believe a word this woman has said today, but I'll go and invest an hour in it and see if she can convince me. And it's there, and they all use their full name, their photograph, they're proud of their session. So, you
That's
know,
powerful.
yeah, I don't know. I was just obsessed with proving that life goes on. So,
Yeah, well, we both share that mission. And what is the name of your podcast? I'll link to it below as well.
yeah, it's called The Infinite Life. And then it's got my name on the logo that says with Katische Haberfield. So, yeah, The Infinite Life.
The Infinite Life. I love that name. And I do feel that you're a very courageous person for taking on this work and this journey. Yeah, because, every invitation that you've been given by your spirit team, you have you have accepted, and the hospital, moving to a home that has the hospital across the road is almost, seems to me like another point, similar to when you trained as a wine expert and then had to give up alcohol. Like, you are invited to look at what your next step is and to step into it, and you do so courageously. And this is not an easy conversation to have, like you say. But there are points of resonance, certainly many things that I've heard before throughout my career investigating these things. You do shine like a light to the ghosts that need help, and they come to you. I've heard that time and again as well. So that's not an unfamiliar concept. It's a rather beautiful one, isn't it? To think that you shine for them, and they are able to see you. And yeah, so there's so much for us to keep talking about, Katish. So is there any last uplifting message perhaps you want to leave the audience with for today, and then we'll come back for part 2?
Always trust that there is an angel there standing right beside you, behind you, that you can reach out to in your darkest moments. Even if you don't believe they exist, every person has an angel. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And if you can just start with believing in angels, the rest will unfold. You are never alone.
What a beautiful message to end on. I absolutely love that. And yes, you do have a whole part of your story which is about channeling angels, and it's fascinating. We're going to talk more about it. For now, thank you so much, Katish.
You're welcome.
It's been a great joy to have you. I will stop sharing, and we will come back soon.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Sisters. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. And don't forget to rate and review the show. Have an experience you'd like to share with me? Get in touch at my website, karinamachado.com, or find me on Facebook at Karina Machado Author. After all, there's nothing more powerful than a story.